It is a misty spring morning out the rabbit room window, but it is spring nonetheless, and that makes it a great time for breeding rabbits. Let's talk about why. Okay, so why is spring a great time for breeding rabbits? Well, I'm actually going to say spring is the best time for breeding rabbits, and there's a number of reasons why that's true. So let's just start this off by saying that this is something to keep in mind so that you can hit those spring breeding times. And, you know, by breeding early and maybe bumping up your breedings, you could actually get a couple of litters in the spring, and it might be well worth your doing that for the reasons that we're going to discuss. So first of all, spring's the natural time for rabbits to breed. If you saw the recent Twitter-pated video, that, you know, they just bred so easily. Everybody could see in there, everything happened quickly. And why? Because that's their natural cycle of breeding. But it's also because, you know, the day length it's lengthening. They're coming out of winter. They're feeling that increase in daylight, just like chickens coming out of a molt, chickens, you know, starting to lay eggs and fertilize other birds and all the other wildlife. It's just the natural time of year for everything to start breeding. So your breeding itself is apt to go more easily than it did at different times of the year. Now, I'm not saying don't breed your rabbits all year long. I do think that you should be breeding year round. It keeps the rabbits fit. It keeps their reproductive health at an optimum. But, you know, we've seen in other videos at different times of year, it can be a little more of a struggle. So really try and capture that spring breeding and capitalize on the fact that they're rearing and ready to go. Now, there's other reasons that I really like spring for breeding, and that's because the temperatures are moderating. So I'm not dealing with so many of those cold lows or swings in winter temperatures. And again, it's not that rabbits can't take winter temperatures. They can, even the young stock can, but it is certainly more of a factor. And when you have temperatures more around, say, the 40 to 60 to 70 range, you know, lower than 80, those are great temperatures for the rabbits to be dealing with all around. Probably a little bit less for you to have to keep an eye on, including with the small kits. You know, digestively, those temperatures, they're eating and drinking well because they're not putting so much of that energy into staying warm. Water is staying open, it's not freezing, so they should always have water in front of them, which of course they should anyway, but you know, sometimes you're battling nature, and you're not battling that in the spring when it's in those warm temperature ranges or moderate temperature ranges. And, you know, they also are not reducing their eating like they might in the summer, because they're just too hot. So this is a time of year when they're just well-balanced, eating well, getting all the water, getting everything they need, and you're not fighting those temperatures. You get to raise the kits up to to a weaning, pre-weaning stage, and without them having to fight so much the elements of nature, and you get them well set for weaning before the high heat of summer kicks in. That high heat of summer is more of a stress for everybody, not just the breeders, but the kits, and it can be a real issue for the kits, heat stress, when they're weaning, especially. You know, the more we can reduce stress on the rabbits, the better they're going to be. Yes, we can get them through some of these things, but why not do it when we can maybe reduce the stress and not have to make them or ourselves deal with so much. Another issue is heat sterility in the bucks. So breeding in the spring, you're not going to have this issue. You're coming off of winter. Any heat sterility that they might have had from last summer is long gone behind them. If you do think you still have sterility issues in your bucks, then that is a time to cull that buck. If you don't have good active winter spring breeding, that's time to replace your buck regardless. So, you know, we talk about these moderate temperatures and whatnot, and sure, you're going to get them in the fall, but The other problem with that in the fall is that the fall temperatures might be right for raising young, but are your bucks going to be able to breed and breed in sizable numbers? You know, it can take a month to 3 months for a buck to rebound from heat sterility. The best way to get them to rebound from it is to try to breed. It either works or it won't, but it's cleaning the pipes, so to speak. So get rid of it, any dead sperm that's in there, let them reproduce and rebuild and breed again. That's the way to get them going. But it can take time to do that, and it can especially take more time with the older bucks. They say that the older bucks can be 60 to 90 days coming off of heat sterility, where your younger bucks are probably more apt to come back a little more quickly. So if we're looking at, say, you know, trying for a fall breeding, trying to capture those moderate days where you have, you know, again, the open water, the willingness for them to want to eat because they're not so hot, and also not putting all the energy into staying warm like they might in the winter. The problem is you might want to be breeding in August and September, but even here, I'm in the Northeast, and even here, like especially recently, we can have 85, 90 degree days into September. Now, if you tack a month or two onto that, now we're looking at October, November, it can be trickier, and yes, you should still do it, but then we're getting into those more difficult times of winter where the temperatures start to drop and we start to fight those battles. So overall, you know, spring is just a great time to be breeding. Plan your calendar, plan your breeding to get at least one good solid spring breeding in, but I'm even going to say try to get 2. So, you know, even though I intend to breed all summer, you know, that decision could be made for me if we start getting 85, 90 degree days consistently, say 3 to 5 of those in a row come June. That might be enough to make some of those bucks go sterile, especially if you're outside. Like, I'm a little more protected in here because we get better shade and it's cooler in here than it is outside, but it can still be an issue. So, and again, you know, we're all struggling with different changing weather and climate patterns. So although I generally can breed in June and even July and even August usually, but last year we had record high heat days, record heat waves, and they started early on. So I want to make sure I've got a good solid couple of breedings in the spring. So, you know, started early in March. I'll wait 5 weeks. I'll be able to breed again by May at the latest, and I'll get those litters on the ground, and that's going to keep those does productive, which is at the end of the day our biggest goal. Keep them in good fighting fit reproductive order and go from there. So that's my spiel on that. Do yourself a favor. For one thing, you're just going to make life easier. Start putting these animals together now. You are going to find that where you may have been battling lifting issues and interest issues all year long, it's kind of magical in the spring where it just happens. And then, you know, that kind of inertia of the good mothering, the good reproduction, that'll go far in your rabbitry to help you out. So we've got more on this over at meetrabbits.org. So after you like, share, and subscribe here, come on over there, read more in detail. And again, if you've got something to offer or a question to ask, respectfully, drop it in the comments. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you again.